Hi there, MTSU friends. Welcome to our session on group work and collaboration. And as always, if you'd like to practice while I talk, you feel free to do that within your Canvas account. Otherwise, you can always you can always relax and sit back and watch that recording later. As you can tell, we're going to focus on how to create the right circumstances for students to work with their peers in a variety of formats. Feel free to consider this as a menu of options for you to consider when you're trying to build those opportunities for students to learn from each other. You definitely don't have to do all of them in order to have a successful course where students are engaged and interacting with each other. So I think it is a fair starting point to consider that before we have that group assignment, that group discussion, that group project, that you have to have groups. And that's where we're going to go ahead and start with our session today. We're going to go ahead and head into one of my courses, one of my fake courses with fake students, so you can understand the process of setting up those student groups. So you'll want to do that from inside one of your courses that has student enrollments inside of it. And your student enrollments live inside the people area of your course right here. Remember that typically we don't let students into the people area, but there is one circumstance coming up where that might be something you turn on. Otherwise, go ahead and click on inside of people. And once you do, you may see some tabs across the top. Now, you may not have all the tabs that I have. You'll most likely have just two tabs if you're starting off. You'll have an Everyone tab, and you'll have a kind of more generic Project Groups tab. And the rest of the tabs you see on my screen here represent group sets. So this is a group set. Here's another group set. And I've chosen to name these group sets after the title of the project so I can remember what that group set is for. And a group set, just to lay out the definition, is a set of groups. It's a group of groups that has a common theme. And in this case, it's because we are studying corporations in my fictional business class, and students have to complete a case study in these groups. And just to show you what we're about to set up, each of these areas opens up when you select on that little arrow so you can see exactly who is in each group. And individuals who don't yet have a group assignment will be listed on the left. These would typically be late enrolling students. So say you started that group project maybe 3 weeks in and 4 students kind of appear in Canvas out of nowhere. Well, you can still add them to a group since you have a plus button here. If you have a group that is available, like this group, you can just drag them into the group to assign them to a group. So this is what we're heading towards. Now, if you're just starting out, you'll no doubt want to create your brand new set. So I'm going to pretend in my fictional business class, since it's organized by weekly modules, I have a week 6 project we're going to start. So I'm going to make a group set for that. So I'll select group set. I'll go ahead and give that a name. And then you see or rather one option here. I'm going to skip over for now this self sign up option because I'd rather show you that separately. In short, though, it allows for you to have students put themselves in groups, but that does involve a different workflow. For I'd say the 99% of all higher ed instructors, they prefer to have groups being made in one of two ways. Either we have Canvas pick, that was always my option that I chose as an instructor. Or for those of us that want to have more control, you can create the groups later. So it makes the empty groups, and then you can manually decide who gets to work with whom. So you have the automatic options or the manual option. So let me show you automatic first. You can choose to have designated the number of groups, like Canvas make 4 groups, or Canvas you can have at the most 4 people in a group. So what we're doing here is we're defining, as we call it, the membership limit, not accepting any new folks after 4 in the group. Now, if you choose this next option, and again, it is merely an option, you can choose to designate a student group leader. And if you do, you can check off the box for that. Basically, a group leader can manage members. They can remove people from the group. So keep that in mind. If you don't want that to happen, if you feel it's not necessary, then you don't have to check off that option. If you do, though, just be aware that they do have some powers. They can edit the group name, but they cannot modify how big the group gets. And if you do designate a student group leader, you'll see an additional symbol pop up when the groups are made. So I'll go ahead and leave this on so you can see what that symbol looks like. So go ahead and hit save. And now my groups have been made with at the most 4 people per group. And the group leader has been randomly chosen. You can choose actually whether you want the first person to be the leader or if you really want Canvas to be random. But that leader is indicated with the little silhouette. Now, you still have choice, even though Canvas made the groups for you. If you don't like what Canvas did, and it's okay, half the time I did not, you still have some control. So for example, I don't like that Jeff is the leader. I can remove them as the leader and I can pick someone else. So inside the 3 dots menu option, you can indicate a different person. You also see in the 3 dots for an individual, you can actually still move people around. I loved the automatic option, but half the time Canvas would pick inevitably those students that should not be together, which I hated. So I would then take a look at the setup groups and I would move people around. So I can choose to move this individual to a different group. Or if you like drag and drop, you can even drag them. So I can move Steven over to here to be part of this group. So you have lots of options. I can even take, let's say Yelena here. Maybe she's decided to drop the class. And I can try to put her inside the unassigned students area, or I can just move her to a different group entirely. Now, as you see here, each of these groups also has a little menu. In this menu, let me move this up here. You have 3 options. You can delete the group, in which case these 3 students come back to the unassigned list. You can edit the name of the group or the limit or both. Or, and we'll visit this a little bit later, you can visit what's called the group homepage, which for now I'll just define as a semi-private space where you expect students to be working on the group project, collecting artifacts, research, drafting papers, having discussions. So it's a place to store that incremental work where you expect to see evidence of that activity and something that you can check. So love that you can actually look in each of these areas. We'll visit that a little bit later. Now, remember, I picked this so that there are 4 people in a group, but if there's need for me to create more, I can make another group and then rearrange people as needed, so you can still change your mind, right? Or for those of us that like to play with spreadsheets, and I'm positive there's some of you, you can create groups on a spreadsheet. Now, this does entail some preparation. You'll need to download the course roster report, which you can access here. And there's also additional documentation here so that you can build the spreadsheet appropriately. But once you have that spreadsheet, you can just drag and drop it here and make the groups that way. So that's for those of us that really don't like all of the clicking. And then up here in the corner, you can edit information about the entire group. You can also download the roster so I can get the spreadsheet version of these groups. That's actually nice because if you want to create a future set of groups and you just don't want to mess with a template, you can get a template this way, and then you just edit the template for that future group. Or let's say it's some weeks in the future, and this set of groups was so awesome that you want to keep this group for the next project. You can make a copy of this set. So it turns out there's a lot you can do to set up your groups. And remember, this is the automatic method, right? For that manual effort, and by the way, that's okay if you want to be very specific about who gets to work with whom. In this case, you're going to choose create groups later. And when you get here, realize you have to do all the work from this point. So I have my entire roster. You can make those empty group sets here through import or just click and create, say, the first group. I want 3 people in a group. You can then open it. Of course, it's empty. And then you can just drag and drop people like so. Or again, for those of us that don't want to do the drag and drop, there is a little plus button here where I can just choose the group to put Troy in. So there he goes. And notice it says full because the membership limit has been reached. And in the 3 dots, you can still decide to have a leader if you want. So that's automatic and manual setups for groups. You can do either or both. That's up to you. Now, if you remember at the top of the hour, I talked about setting up groups where students can put themselves in groups. And now, if that's appropriate for your particular use case, there are a couple of things you have to be sure of. For one thing, you would have to allow self-sign up, of course. You have to check off that box to do that. But for students to sign themselves up, even after you have this checked off, students have to see the groups. And remember that groups are in people. So this means you have to let students view the people area. Now, I would recommend, just to manage students, that you do this on a temporary basis. So for example, I would say, students, I'm going to let people be open for 72 hours. You have 72 hours to put yourself in a group. If you're not in a group by then, I am in charge of putting whomever I want with whomever I want. So I would put a limit on it. Otherwise, students will never get themselves in line. So remember, you must get to people here and make that visible by going into settings, go to navigation, find people, and then you need to drag that up. Now you will have to remember at the end of the time that you have to put it back to be hidden later. So you have to let people be visible. And there is an additional setting here I would also have turned on. So once you're in settings, go to details, and at the bottom, keep going, keep going. You have a checkbox. Now, I think this is an option because you can set up the groups but have people put themselves in the groups. On the other hand, there is an additional nuance where I might throw up my hands entirely and say, students, not only do you sign up for groups, you make the groups yourself. And so if you want to do that, you would have to check off the box, but it's not absolutely necessary. That's appropriate for times when you want students to create their own, say, study groups. You're not monitoring the study groups, but you're allowing students to work together in whatever manner they please. So that suits you, then check that off. All right, so once that has been saving and Canvas is thinking about it, here's how your students will get into their own groups. So I'm going to double check my people area here. Mm, Actually, here it is right here. Let me go ahead and make the group set. See, here you can set up the structure, right? So I would say, hey, students, you can make 5 groups total. You can have a limit of 3 students in a group. And then once this is saved, ooh, let's try that again. Students would have to go to the people area and locate the self-sign up group. Oh, it's really thinking about it now. Oh dear. Let's see and double check my people area. But in any case, right, like if we can get this to kind of save and register on time. Oh, hello, Canvas. They will be able to see the roster, so just be aware of that, right? You may be very cognizant of privacy issues. Realize that the people area does let students see each other in the group. So let's see if our changes here were saved. I'm going to go ahead and pull up a student here. Ah, there we go. We're going to try this one more time. Actually, let me do multiple. There we go. Ah, I believed and I made it happen. All right, so there's our self-sign up groups. We have people available, so we're going to call in our student here. Here she is. She goes to the business course. We're going to refresh because I did let people be visible. Let's double check on that. Let's check on settings. Yep, there it is. So let's just save that. Refresh on our screen here. You know what, let's do this. We're going to leave people open for now. Let me go ahead and show you the group homepage and then let me swing on back to the student view of how to self-sign up groups because I just don't want to delay the training any further than it has to be. All right, so we'll head on back to people and I'll keep an eye on our students' view of the page here. Now, if you'd like to see that group homepage, because remember, they have this access to this semi-private space where they can work on the project. You'll need to go to that particular set, and I happen to have one set up here inside of this corporation case study groups. And there is an active group space for this particular group. So as an instructor, I can go to the 3 dots and visit the group homepage. And to your eyes, I'm sure it looks very much like a course. As a matter of fact, some of us call it a course within a course. The big thing you need to know that is that not only the instructor, but the individual students can edit and create anything. And that's a paradigm shift, right? Remember, in a regular course, students can't commonly create materials, but here we're letting students do that because this is really their space. The student view of the space is just the same, except they don't have this ability to hop back and forth between spaces. So the home area of the group set or the group homepage has a recent activity view, which just lists the most recent items that have been updated. So in this case, these students have announcements set to bring research to them in the announcements area. So these are the recent announcements. They, as well as you, can create announcements, and they're all collected within the announcements area. And by the way, like you can do anything in this space too. So if you want to send an announcement to one group, you could because you have access to plus add announcement. And it looks just like any announcement. Anybody, as well as the students, can create pages. And this is where students can build group notes. So in the case of these students, one of the students set up this chart on Walmart and they all added some notes to it. And if your students want to track the action of students in the group, there is right here a three dots and a view page history. So just to give you proof of concept, at the very beginning of this page, let me go way back. This was the page originally with no content, right? A student created the page. And then right here, James added his bit. And then Bruce added his bit. My point is anybody in the group can track each other's progress on the page, including you as the instructor. And to create a page, they can go into the pages index, click on plus page, look familiar, and then build that out for the other students to use. You can also view who's part of the group. You also have here a way to create a group discussion for the students. And this is where I need to manage expectations. Any discussion that is built here, any announcement that is built here, right, that applies to, is only available to these group members as well as the instructor. And in addition, the discussions are not tied directly to grades. So this is just their space to have a discussion on anything they wish, but you can track what's happening in the discussion. Group members can also access and upload files. This is helpful for them to organize their resources. And they have here access to a feature, which we'll see a little bit later, called collaborations. In short, collaborations are common Microsoft items or even Google items. And I know they can make these items outside of Canvas, but this offers a convenient way for students or you to create a common Microsoft document and have everybody be able to edit the document. But it's housed here. All right. So that's basically our tour of the space. And you've seen exactly how the instructor gets into it. But let me show you how the student gets into it. Then I can pause for some questions. So I'm just going to scroll on here. I'm not sure why the people area is still not showing, but let me show you how students get to the groups area. They could go inside the course. In fact, that's probably the easiest way. So here's that student. There is a list of course groups in the corner on the home page. So from here, they can enter the group, or they can do so from the groups button in the course navigation. Just keep in mind, every single group that the student is put in across all their courses is listed here. And instructors are not always very careful about creating good titles for groups. Not that you wouldn't be, just saying that I wasn't. So students might find it easier to go inside the course first. All right. So let me pause here. Any questions? Would you like me to address the question there in the chat?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Helen.
Yeah, sure. Um, Great question, Anne. So the discussions you saw in the group homepage are informal, ungraded, just within the group. But if you do want to assess students on a group discussion, you can set that up and have the grade be registered in the traditional grade book. So we're heading there in a little bit there, Anne.
Okay. And does that answer your question, or at least give you a road to get it answered once we get to that point? Well, Helen, I actually have a couple questions.
Sure.
So one of the things that, is very limiting with discussions, at least in our current LMS, is that once a group has been created, you
Mhm.
can't go back in and augment the group set. Meaning that if you had it set to four people, but then you ultimately, you know what, I want five in this group, or I want three in that in these groups. Can you change that after they've been created?
I do believe you can. Now let's check this out. So these groups have been created, right?
Hmm.
Let's go into edit here. Okay, we can set the leadership. Um, if I want to add a limit, can I? Yeah, I can. Can definitely add a new group.
Okay. Okay, good. Second question. So in D2L, whenever we create groups, we can automatically assign Dropbox or an assignment, area that they can submit their folders to or their submissions to, or a discussion. That's something that we can do upon creation of the groups. Is that something that's capable, or that Canvas is capable of?
Yes, so you can create the group assignment or the group discussion, set up like a regular assignment up until a point, and then you can tell Canvas the group set that is going to be completing the assignment.
Well, no, I understand you can do that if you go in and create the discussion itself. What I'm asking is while we're creating the groups. So, for example, the week six project you have right here,
Mhm.
and you're going through and you're creating the groups, and you're like, okay, well, I want to create uh, for the week six project, I want a submission folder for them, so an assignment, and
Oh,
but then I
yes.
also want a discussion for that. Can you create it from this interface, or do you have to manually create those tools and then assign the
Oh,
group?
that's a good call out. Thank you for asking. The people area in Canvas is just to manage the humans. You'd have to create the specific assignment or discussion manually and then assign the group set to them. So you can't create the assignment from inside here, no.
Okay, so that actually brings up another question. So, um, with discussions, for example, if you go in and create a discussion, you can have it set up, at least in T12, and I hate to use the comparison, but that's what we're all used to.
Sure.
Um, we can go in and create a discussion, but it will automatically create, like in this case, let's say there were six groups, or
Mhm.
in that group set, there are six groups. It will automatically create six topics, one for each group that is specific to them that no other people outside of their little group can access. So are you
Oh,
saying that in Canvas, you would have to manually create those discussions and tie it to the group?
let me check my discussions area here because I have a group discussion set up. So here's the prompt for that discussion. It's about this video. So at the top here is a group discussion button, so I can go into each of those separate areas. So here's number 5, just so we can track it. And I'm seeing here that has a grayed out checkbox. It means we've already had submissions to it, so I can't edit the prompt anymore. In other words, it looks like each group is going to have the same prompt. Now, if you're really married to the idea of each of my groups having an entirely different topic, you could create, say, 6 different discussion boards and then just assign each unique discussion board to just a single group. That you can do, but it is going to be manual.
Okay. And just to touch on what you were just clicking on, you clicked on group discussion there at the top, and you were able to see the different groups. So if you wanted to assess this,
Mhm.
this is the way that you would do it.
If I wanted to assess it, I would go to SpeedGrader would be here. And I don't think I have, oh, I have some discussion boards here. But I can see the discussion posts here. I can grade on a rubric.
Is it indicated anywhere which group they're in?
No, because it's an individual grading
Okay.
process.
Sorry,
Mhm.
I know a lot of questions. I'm just trying to make sure I
Sure,
understand the tool because I'm going to have to answer questions.
sure. Yeah, of course, of course. All right.
Helen, I have a quick question, if you don't mind.
Of course.
So like when you say that you are going to make the people icon I mean the people in the navigation visible to students so that they can select their groups, will students access the class roster?
They would actually. Let me pull up a different student because I'm seeing why I could not pull up people on that first student that I just chose.
Because
Uh,
I don't think that instructors want students to see the class roster.
right. So just for clarity here, Hongmin is talking about. No, that's really odd. People should be here. But you're right, Hongmin. Like when they access the people area, it's basically the same as the instructor sees. So they would see this, maybe less information about, for example, they would not see last activity or total activity, but they would be able to see people's names and the links that allow them to access the profile. So I'm saying, while this is a possibility, right, you may not want to use this option at all. It's just that this is an option that's available for anybody who wants to have self sign up groups. But you're right, they would be able to see everybody else on the roster, and you may have really good concerns about that. Yeah. All right.
So if we don't want have this turn on, like for people,
Mhm.
those students will not be able to self
Correct.
enroll in
Correct.
a group. Okay.
Correct. And to be honest, like most instructors I know don't want that. Like they want to be the ones that create the groups. They don't want students to have that kind of power. So in which case we just leave people hidden.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. All right. Let's head into setting up group assignments and group discussions since we've already kind of started talking about the process anyway. Uh, so let's revisit the workflow, right? We've set up people inside of groups, right? We have week 6 groups going. But so far, the work that they've done in the group homepage is not directly tied to a grade. If you'd like for students to submit what they have worked on, you're going to have to create a graded group discussion or a graded group assignment. And the way to do that is simply go to your modules, locate a good assignment. And I think a good practice here is to duplicate one that already exists because, after all, it probably has a great format that you want to use, especially if you're using the template, which you should be. So I'll use this as my example. It starts out being a regular assignment. And so once you've duplicated or created that assignment, create your settings as normal until you get to the group assignment area right here. You'll want to check off the box. This is a group assignment. Now, the next checkbox is optional. It depends on how you want to grade. So many instructors like to have a shorter pile of digital papers to grade. I don't blame you. In that case, you don't want to check off this box. So if I have groups of 3, in SpeedGrader, it will mean I will see each group's work just once, not 3 times, once. And so when I give a group a grade of 90%, every one of those 3 students will have a 90 in their grades. So that's the meaning here in Canvas of a group grade. Now, if you feel differently, you can check off this box to assign a grade to each student individually. So if Lauren, Jennifer, and Hong Min are in a group, Jennifer submitted for the group. With this checkbox checked means I will see the same submission for Lauren as I would for Jennifer, as I would for Hong Min, but it lets me give a grade for Lauren and Jennifer that's different from Hongmin's. Does that make sense? So you can have three different grades, one for each member of the group if you choose. And that's what that checkbox lets you do. So while that is optional, this is mandatory, and this is also mandatory. Here's where you have to designate the group set. So this pulls directly from the sets you have inside of people. So I can choose week 6. Now notice here, this actually reminds me of Jimmy's comment from earlier. You could go in reverse. You could create the assignment first and then create the group set here. Maybe that fits your brain better, and that's okay if it does. But you will have to determine a set of groups to tackle this assignment. And then finally, under Assign Access, you have an option here too, because you have group sets. You can make it so that everyone has the same due date, which really means all 5 groups have the same due date. But if you prefer something different, you can differentiate the dates for each group. So you can have group 1 have this date, and maybe group 2 has a different date. So that's a choice if you want to enable that. Otherwise, you can just have everybody submit on the same time. And then you would hit Save and Publish. Let me go ahead and choose everyone for this, because I do want you to see how it's like for a student to submit. So here's our group assignment all set up. We're going to call on Bruce here. All right, so here is his group. So he's given a warning. You're going to submit for everybody in your group. So he goes ahead and uploads as normal. And then he's done. So he's submitted on behalf of his group. Good for him. The setup for group discussions is really similar. So let me go ahead and show you that here. So here is a group discussion. Again, I would duplicate a pre-existing template discussion for this to ensure you've got an appropriate chunked set of instructions like these. Go into the settings here under Edit. And then you'll want to check off, first of all, that it is graded, because that allows you to use a rubric to grade those discussion posts. And B, check off that this is a group discussion, in which case, again, you have to pick the appropriate group set. And then the rest of the settings are just like setting up any regular discussion. All right, here's a good time now to just pause. Do you have any questions about anything you've seen so far? And I hope this answered your question from before. But it would definitely ensure that, only groups of 3 or 4 access a board instead of being overwhelmed by 50 posts on the same discussion board. Is there a way to see all the submissions from all the groups at one time? I do believe yes. My discussion board is not very busy, but if I went to, I wonder, let's go back. So if I go back to the regular discussion, so this is the initial discussion post here. Oh, no, you can't. So I think you're going to have to go to each discussion board to see those replies. So in other words, they're not all collected on the same board. What you've basically created is 5 different smaller boards. All right, any other questions for you before we move on to peer review, I think is the next topic. All right, then. All right, let's take a look at peer review. So I'm going to head on back to one of my courses here. Now, group work is a great way for students to collaborate and work on those soft skills as well as learn together on your academic content. Here's a second option for allowing students to work together. And I'll just share from my personal experience. As someone who used Canvas a lot with students, this was actually one of the most highest rated activities in my classes ever. And this is the peer review assignment. So I have used peer review according to the following workflow, which I want to share with you. I have here an assignment cycle, and you see here, just focus on this section. I basically have two copies of the same assignment. I have one geared towards peer review, where students submit their first drafts of things. And then I have in the middle of the two assignments this quiz, which could be an assignment as well, but this is a place for the individual student to be gently forced to look at the feedback other students have posted and then have them reflect. Am I going to take this seriously as far as the comments from other students? Like, what changes will I make so that they decide what to do with the review before they submit their final draft? And that's what this second copy of the assignment is for. You'll also notice this is the one that bears the points because the initial peer review assignment is out of 0. Now, if you're feeling, oh, I don't know if I like that because I want to have some points registered to this, I would recommend you have this be a small amount of points. And further, I would insert those module requirements to make sure they have to do this before they do this, and they have to do both of these things before they touch this. So that requires the student to have to undergo the preliminary steps before they submit the final draft. And then as far as the setup goes here, here's that initial peer review assignment. It's a regular assignment. But at the bottom here is that peer reviews area. So you'll want to check off require. And then like with the setup of groups, you have to determine how you want Canvas to proceed with this. Do you want Canvas to pick who gets to see whose work? That's automatic. Or do you want to be in charge of who gets to see whose work? If you decide to throw up your hands and let Canvas do it, you will have to tell Canvas how many reviews each student will see. So how many times are they peer reviewing? How many reports? And you'll want to designate a date when Canvas makes the decision. And I would recommend, this is from personal experience more than anything else. You see that due date that I have here, right? It's not the same as the assigned reviews date. And that's key, actually. The due date is when each student has to submit their first draft. But the assigned reviews date being later means late students have a couple of days to get their work in. If you have them match, what I found was that late students end up having nothing to review. And so they sit here in class twiddling their thumbs, which is not productive. I know that that is a natural consequence of their actions, but it's not the experience that we want. So I recommend that your assigned review date be later than the original due date. And then here, I think is a useful checkbox, you can have peer reviews appear anonymously. So once you set up the assignment, you'll have here an additional area called peer reviews. You can click it here and see who is reviewing whose work. So Shirley will be reviewing Troy and Jeff. Shirley has already reviewed Troy's work. There's a little checkbox for that. A exclamation point here typically means the student has not submitted something or the review has not yet been completed. By the way, you can click on their names here. So I'm clicking on Troy so that you can see his submission details. So this is his report that he submitted. And here, once people have submitted feedback for him, you can actually see the feedback from others. So this is what Britta said about Troy's report. So you can see what people say about the reports that they see. Now, if you want to have some control or more control over this, uh, I can move people around. So if I don't like that Ben is seeing Jeff's work, I can remove him and I can put other people's work there because you have a little menu for that. So peer review day comes. Before that date, you want to have students have already submitted to the original report, because I would suggest that you do this in class if at all possible, to have students working on the peer review activity in front of you. Realize that this is not the normal workflow for students, so they will have questions. So here's a little snippet of that peer review activity. Let's take a look at Annie. Annie went into the course. So just to give you some context here, she goes into the assignment. She already submitted. And now she has to do a peer review for somebody. There are links right here. So she could go directly to the other student's work from here. So she clicks on that other person's review, and she will have a way. Actually, I should go to anonymous 1, not 2. But she will have a way to view the rubric. You saw that pop up there just now. And scrolling on down, she sees the other person's report. And then there's a little request here. Can you go ahead and fill out the rubric? This is a great way for you to talk about the rubric because, as we know, students don't always comprehend the rubric stipulations. So after you've had that discussion, students would go through and fill it in and add comments. And then once complete, they hit submit assessment. So that's how students complete the peer review. Now, Troy is a little further on in this process. He did already submit his work. He wants to see what other people said. So he wants to see that feedback. So he would go to the original report and then go to view feedback. Here's where he can see those generic comments from others. And then moving on down here, remember we turned on anonymity, right? If he clicks on the drop down, there's a review from anonymous 1 and then anonymous 2. But his work will be shown here, right? Obviously not from the others. That's peer reviews. As far as assignments go, you can set up peer reviews for discussions as well so that students inside of a peer review group can review each other's discussion posts too. So it works pretty much the same. Any questions on peer reviews? All right. I know you're like, oh my goodness, this is going to be really cool and I'm excited to use it. I'm thinking about how to use it. I love it. Let's go ahead and move on and take a look at just a few other options for students to work together, right? This is option 2 of 4. Luckily, the other 2 are pretty easy to talk about. Remember, we talked about collaborations previously. So to give you an idea here, collaborations were previously shown when I was showing you the group homepage. Let me quickly show you that here. So right here is that area. And remember, it allows for only students within this group and the instructor, if they so choose, to create a common Microsoft document, maybe a Google document if you have that on. The same steps apply for if an instructor wants to set up a class collaboration. So I'll go ahead and enter that class here. In fact, I'll do that within business. So you see here, I have already enabled this so that it's visible. And if you want to set that up, students have to see it, so you have to make it visible. When you select on that area, and I actually have the old interface on, yours might look a little more updated, but it works just the same. Here is a way to start a new collaboration process. So depending on your choices, right? Pick the one that appeals to you. I'll pick Office 365. And then some options pop up here. If you're using the Office 365, the item you're creating will be blank. Now, this applies just for the initial creation. You can go into the document after and format it if you want. And then right here in the window is where you'll invite your students. Unfortunately, at least with the Office 365, there's not a quick way to add everybody at once. You're going to have to click. I'm sorry. But this is a way for you to customize who gets to be part of the collaboration. So you don't have to have everybody here. There's also an option here for you to start a new group collaboration if using Office. And you notice it's pulling from your groups list. So once you have your people figured out, you hit save. And then this new window pops up and gives you entry into the blank Word document. And so from here, yes, after you sign in, you can format the document and then let students know that the collaboration is ready. This is a great place for you to do brainstorming, right? Idea generation, anything you want for this common collaboration. And since I created the collaboration, they're all visible here for me. Right? So here I can view the progress of the students on the collaboration. And I picked a PowerPoint, right? You can have multiple formats for your blank item. That's collaborations. So there's a third option for students to work together. This is that whole class option, but remember, students can make their own inside of groups. The last option, and I think one that flies under the radar a lot, I think is suitable for folks that just want students to work with each other, but they don't want the hassle of working with a cloud service, right? We just don't have time to set up Microsoft right now. And so this fourth and last option here has to do with wiki pages. Let me show you one. It's a regular page, one that you would create from inside of modules and then set up. I've chosen to make this the center of an activity. So I have here a embedded simulation just to show you, right? It can be played with by anybody. But the idea here is that students have access to edit the page. So, which does mean you have to think about management, because you can have several people on the page. But this allows for students to be editing the page directly while they answer whatever questions you have here for them. So here's Britta's answer. So the setup works like setting up any page. Once you've added your content, the only thing you have to do to make this editable is to change this option, because commonly it's set to only teachers. But if you need students to edit the page, you have to change this to teachers and students. And this is also one of those activities not tied to the gradebook directly, which means you can't insert a due date, technically. You could still add this to people's to-do lists, by checking off this box and putting in the date. So just to show you here, here's our student. And we're going to have her go into that math and science class. Oh, and here's that wiki page right here. So just to show you, she has the edit button. So keep in mind, she could potentially, make a mistake and maybe edit some part of the RCE. That is a risk that you need to take. But here's where she can add her response. And anybody, including the instructor, can track all changes under View Page History. So you see here various points where the student was part of the edit and then points where I was part of it. So I do like that option, right? If you want to do collaboration in a more low-key way, this is actually really quick and easy to set up. However, it does come with some considerations for how this is going to work. Okay, and that's going to bring us to time. We've got a few more minutes. Any other questions for you regarding any other aspect of group work?
Thank you, Helen.
Oh, thank you. And thinking about something that Anne just said made me realize something. You do have turned on in your Canvas, for right now anyway, the AI discussion summaries option. I'm wondering if you use it, can help you get to those trends more easily. Although I think it's going to be confined to the scope of the group, so it'll summarize all of the discussion posts from that group, but not from the entire class, even if you have group discussions set up. So I'm thinking you could probably use that to at least have AI like see if it can pick out some trends for you. Oh, okay. No worries. I get it. All right, friends. So let's head on back here to the end of our session since we've covered all of our content. Well done for us. Thanks so much to everybody who attended. Thanks for your patience, and I'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Y'all have a great day. Bye.
You too.
Too.